Over the course of the weekend, the country of Brazil had a presidential election, and it went horribly wrong because they elected a fascist named Jair Bolsonaro. Now, if you only read American mainstream media such as the New York Times or the Associated Press, you'd think that they elected a far-right populist akin to Donald Trump. But in actuality, this is an individual who is more comparable to Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines, because he's not just a proto-fascist, and he's certainly not a far-right populist. This is an individual who has literally advocated for violence, explicitly so. And let me just say this, I've stated before that the only thing that can essentially defeat right-wing demagogues is left-wing populists. And I think that this is an example that really illustrates how true that is, because had Lula da Silva not been imprisoned on dubious charges, he would be elected president again, because all public opinion polls throughout the country showed that Lula would have won. But because he was imprisoned, now it's the case that Jair Bolsonaro was elected. An actual fascist. And I'll tell you why it is accurate to characterize him as such. But understand that the reason why he was elected is due to mass dissatisfaction with the political establishment in the country of Brazil. There was rampant corruption, and also for the last couple of years, there was this widespread anti-corruption campaign, and right-wingers essentially used this campaign to persecute and prosecute their political opponents. Now, of course, there were legitimate cases of corruption, and there was a lot that was exposed throughout this campaign, but there were right-wingers like Jair Bolsonaro who were opportunistic and capitalized on this situation and capitalized on justifiable rage against the establishment, and it ended up thrusting him into victory. And the reason why this election is so important is because this doesn't just have implications for the country of Brazil and really democracy in Brazil more specifically, but it has implications for the world. Now, I'm going to go through and share some of the quotes that we have from Jair Bolsonaro, because, I mean, I could show you article after article. There's a lot of pieces that have recently been written up about this guy, but I think that his own words speak for themselves. So there's an article by Andrew Fishman of The Intercept, and he compiled a list of quotes from Jair Bolsonaro that really give you just a sense of how terrifying this individual is as the president. Now, understand that some of these quotes, we don't have the context for them, but I think that they still speak for themselves. So nonetheless, in 1993, he stated, quote, "I am in favor of a dictatorship, a regime of exception." And in 1999, he states, "I'm in favor of torture. You know that, and the people are in favor as well." And in that same 1999 television appearance, he also stated, "Through the vote, you will not change anything in this country. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It will only change, unfortunately, when one day we start a civil war here and do the work that the military regime did not do, killing some 30,000, starting with FHC, which was the president then, not kicking them out, killing. If some innocent people are going to die, fine. In any war, innocents die." So I just want to pause right there. This is an individual who has advocated for violence throughout his career, and that hasn't changed recently. So this is absolutely terrifying. And when you look at that quote, he's not talking about killing people abroad and starting a war. He's talking about killing people in Brazil, starting a literal civil war. This is fascism. And it's not just a coincidence that we're seeing the rise of fascist leaders around the country. I mean, Jair Bolsonaro, he's one of them, but it's also happening in Italy, in Poland, in Germany, and a lot of these leaders are replicating Donald Trump's strategy, and Jair Bolsonaro is one of them. He often uses the same techniques that Donald Trump uses, in that he cries fake news about everything that he disagrees with and doesn't like. But getting back to some of his quotes, you're going to see just what kind of a person this guy is. In 2002, he said, "I will not fight nor discriminate, but if I see two men kissing in the street, I'll hit them." In 2003, he said this to a congresswoman, "I would never rape you because you do not deserve it, slut." In 2010, he said, quote, "I would be incapable of loving a homosexual child. I'm not going to act like a hypocrite here. I'd rather have my son die in an accident than show up with some mustachioed guy. For me, he would have died. If your son starts acting a little gay, hit him with some leather and he'll change his behavior." And in 2016, he said, "I would not employ a woman with the same salary of a man, but there are many women who are competent." In 2017, he said, "Beyond Brazil, above all, since we are a Christian country, God above everyone, it is not this story, this little story of secular state. It is a Christian state, and if a minority is against it, then move. Let's make a Brazil for the majorities. Minorities have to bow to the majorities. The law must exist to defend the majorities. Minorities must fit in or simply disappear." And in 2017, he said, "I'll give carte blanche for police to kill." Now, that's just some of the problematic things he said. He said racist things about Afro-Brazilians. He said more sexist, misogynistic, and homophobic things. And he's advocated for violence again and again and again. But because people were so dissatisfied with the political establishment in Brazil and this culture of corruption, cronyism, and just sheer incompetence on behalf of lawmakers, well, they opted to burn it all down in the same way that Americans decided to burn it all down when it comes to Donald Trump. And this is the individual who they elected as president. Now, I want to go to a quote from Glenn Greenwald, who lives in Brazil, and kind of summarized the situation in a really concise manner. He states, "When a ruling class fucks over enough of the population for a long enough period of time, they're going to burn it down out of desperation and anger, one way or the other. At some point, democracies are going to need to grapple with that, or there will be Bolsonaros everywhere." So if Bolsonaro actually does follow through with some of the threats that he's made, then democracy in Brazil may not last very much longer. Because this is someone who has made it very clear that he has authoritarian tendencies and he would like to be a dictator. So this is something that is terrifying right now for the people of Brazil, but it also has broader implications on the world. So back in August, he actually, like Trump, threatened to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement in the event he won, but recently he backtracked on that a couple of days ago, saying that he wouldn't choose to do such a thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean his victory won't still be a disaster for the planet, because he has expressed willingness to open up the Amazon to private companies. And as this Common Dreams article explains, these companies are already salivating at the thought of exploiting the Amazon rainforest. And this tweet from David Sirota really puts it all into perspective. He states, "The planet's biggest shield against climate change, the Amazon rainforest, was just put under the control of a maniacal right-winger who will likely pursue a deforestation plan. This will get zero media coverage, even though it threatens the survival of all life on Earth." So this isn't just about Brazil. This has implications for the rest of the world. And this individual, who's a fascist, was just elected by a fairly strong margin. I believe it was 10 points over his opponent. And no matter how hard his opponent tried to tie himself to Lula, who was incredibly popular, he just couldn't pull it off. And there was so much disgust with the establishment, and there was so much political instability, that the people of Brazil opted for someone who would just burn it all down, as Glenn Greenwald states here. His victory is absolutely terrifying, and we have to pay attention to this, because in the event he follows through with his threats of violence, things are going to get ugly in that country really, really quickly. So this is absolutely horrifying news, to say the least.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.